The popular dual cab ute scene is a hive of activity in 2024 with new entrants from most of the main players, plus a few new brand names as well in the past few years. And now it's Mitsubishi's turn. This is the 6th generation Mitsubishi Triton. You've heard it, you've probably read about it. It's got a new platform, a new twin turbo diesel engine, and an overhauled interior as well. So the question is, does the new Triton genuinely move the needle for dual cab performance and functionality, or does it simply keep pace with those new rivals? We're at the national launch just outside of Adelaide. Let's find out. The Triton has been one of the mainstays of Australia's competitive dual cab ute segment for decades, finding favour with buyers mostly on account of its strong value equation, no frills workhorse credentials and its functionality. But with new rivals including the benchmark Ford Ranger and soon the forthcoming Toyota HiLux constantly moving the bar, not to mention a host of fast-moving Chinese brands, the new Triton has its work cut out. So, the nuts and bolts of the new Triton. The most easy talking point here is probably the engine. Mitsubishi says that it is all new, but taking a step back, it does seem like it's more of a thorough overhaul. There are new parts, including new pistons, but generally it's still a 2.4 litre diesel. It's now a twin turbo instead of a single turbo. So you're getting an additional 17 kilowatts and 40 Newton meters overall. So about 10% on both counts. Now the engine is now paired standard to a 6-speed automatic transmission. That's carryover from the previous Triton. So the gear ratios have changed, but the gearbox itself is virtually the same. I think the bigger, probably more relevant talking point here is the wheelbase and wheel track of the new Triton. So it now rides on a 130mm longer wheelbase, and the wheel track is actually widened by 50mm. So that bodes really well for interior space, which we'll get to. But theoretically, it also bodes really well for driving dynamics too, because it gives this car a larger footprint on the road. So all of those changes, and there are quite a few of them, they don't come cheap. So prices are up about $3,500 at the entry level and about $7,000 for this flagship GSR, which is now pushing just under $65,000 before on-road costs.
Other mechanical changes include the introduction of electrically assisted power steering across the lineup, replacing the former hydraulic setup. GLS and GSR grades both come with the Super Select 2 4x4 system with a lockable centre diff that allows 4x4 running on bitumen. The Triton is strictly an automatic proposition for now, but there is a manual version coming on cheaper cab chassis and club cab variants later in 2024. The Triton wins a few key points when it comes to warranty and maintenance, with competitive cap price servicing across 10 years of ownership and a 5-year warranty extension if you service through the Mitsubishi network.
So the Triton feels decidedly more upmarket in 6th generation form, particularly in the case of this GSR flagship. Nice materials everywhere you look. Everything feels really well put together, and there's excellent storage and amenity throughout the cabin, down to things like pop-up consoles, pop-out cup holders. Everywhere you look, there's nice, nifty storage ideas. I really like the setup of the center fascia as well. You still have a fixed set of hardwired buttons and switch gear, so really easy to access on the move. The steering wheel feels really special in the hands. You are missing steering wheel mounted paddle shifters, and I'll get to why that's important in the driving section. But there are a few little shortcuts which mean it doesn't quite hold muster to something like the new Ford Ranger. You jump in, you can see a bit of hard plastic with a cutout in it where the key would go in cheaper models. You've got hard plastics at the contact points as well. It feels nice, but does it feel $65,000 nice? I'm not quite convinced.
The seats of our flagship GSR tend to offer a little more comfort and support than before, while cabin space is middle of the road for the dual cab segment.
So there's also been a big improvement with infotainment. So a lot of that is controlled via this new 9-inch touchscreen. Again, you still have a bank of hardwired buttons and switchgear, which makes navigation of that touchscreen a lot easier on the move. One area where Mitsubishi has sort of fallen a little bit short is the instrument cluster. You cannot get a full digital instrument cluster, even in this flagship GSR trim, which again, when you're pushing nearly $70,000 on the road, it could be a little bit better. So instead you've got two analog gauges separated by a digital readout in the middle.
Power is supplied by an array of 12-volt outlets and USB ports, which are said to offer greater charging capacity than before. The Triton officially ticks all the basic infotainment boxes with the exception of a head-up display, while safety is likewise well sorted, though there is an asterisk against the way some of those standard systems intervene. More on that shortly.
Okay, so we mentioned before the extension in wheelbase and wheel track, and where that is really evident is rear seat space. There is a little bit more room here than before. I've got the seat here set to my driving position, and as you can see, I've got plenty of room for moderate journeys. There's no rear air vents at the back of the center console, but there are vents here in the roof, which Mitsubishi has used in other models beforehand. You've also got USB-C port and a USB-A port. Space is good, as I said. There's a flip down armrest, and again, not a bad selection of materials. It's not as lush in the back here as a high level Ford Ranger, but it's not a million miles away either. Grab rails as well, dual grab rails on either side, which is really handy. So where I would say the Triton does fall a little bit short is with top tether points and child seats. So if you're regularly carrying child seats, like a lot of ute drivers are, including myself, in some models you have individual top tether points behind each individual chair. The Triton instead has one solitary top tether point in the middle, which sounds great in theory, but in practice, you have to make use of these fabric loops. It means that you're not quite able to secure the seats on the outbound chairs as securely as 3 top tether points. So the business end of the new Mitsubishi Triton. So the floor space has been lowered ever so slightly. So theoretically getting stuff in and out of the tray is easier than before. And the tray dimensions have also changed as a result of this car's larger footprint. You can see all of those numbers on screen right now. But the biggest news above all of that is the increase in towing capacity. So we've gone up 400 kilograms to 3.5 tons braked, which basically meets the benchmark of all of this segment. But better than that, you have really good payload credentials with the Mitsubishi Triton. So theoretically, when you have 3.5 tons behind this car, you can carry more weight on board. And that's one of the real unknown things about a lot of these dual cab utes. Some of them with 3.5 tons in tow can only really carry 200-300 kilograms, whereas this is still up around the 500 kilogram mark, which is a real nice thing to have. With all that said though, the tray area isn't perfect. I'll start with this since I've just clunked it open. The tailgate isn't damp. So a lot of these new nifty features sound like semantics, but they are really nice to have on a lot of modern dual cab utes. So no damping for the tailgate. There's no movable tie down points. You simply have 4 fixed tie down points. You do get a tub liner, but there are no power outlets and no exterior load area lighting. And believe it or not, that is another handy inclusion for a ute, especially when you're unloading at night. I think that, coupled with the fact that there's no real innovation here, I look at something like the Ford Ranger and you've got the really cleverly integrated steps. This is kind of just copy and paste from the previous Triton, and I reckon they could have done a little bit more. So when you put all the pieces of the Triton puzzle together, it is clear there is quite a bit of change to this 6th generation model. There is a lot that is carryover, but for the most part, they have done quite a good job with the execution of this car, and the driving is a great demonstration of that. So as soon as you jump in straight away, the electrically assisted steering, it's a revelation. Like it's been in many other dual cab utes, it's far lighter and more immediate than a hydraulic system. There's less unwanted feedback coming through the road, yet you're still getting a steering package that imparts all the important feedback with none of the unnecessary stuff. The seating position feels really good. I'm cosseted, I'm inside the cabin, the seats are comfortable, and you've got reach and tilt adjustment with the steering wheel. So it definitely feels nice and comfortable. And then we get to the ride and handling package. So we know that it's on the longer wheelbase. We know it has a wider front track and rear track. And what that has done is given this vehicle a little bit more stability over bumps, and it's also enabled it to sit flatter through the corners because it now has a larger footprint on the road. So only incremental improvements, but it does feel like a slightly more polished package than before. It definitely doesn't set any new standards for ride and handling. You've got that constant tremoring that is just normal on a lot of dual cab utes, but it's particularly pronounced on this one. The rear end is just busy, it's jiggly at low speeds, and even at high speeds on these mixed rural roads, it's not quite as composed nor as quiet as something like the Ford Ranger. Let's treat that as the dual cab yardstick, because it is. But even in this top spec GSR Triton, it's not quite matching the levels of something like the Ranger, or even as an extension of that, something like the Amarok. That brings us to the engine. So there's a lot of rhetoric about it being a new engine, sequential turbochargers, new pistons, new technology throughout it, but to me it feels inherently like the old engine. It operates a lot like the old engine. Yes, you're getting nice peak torque from really low on the rev count, 1500 RPM onwards. It works really well. But in the upper echelons, it gets the job done without, again, setting any new class benchmarks. It makes a lot of vocals under strain. It's not particularly quick. And again, I think the question mark for it, given it's now rated to tow 3.5 tons, is just how well it's going to do that, because I kind of have my doubts. As an extension of that, rear drum brakes. This is now one of the last remaining options in this category, the rear drum brakes. Again, Mitsubishi said they looked at doing it. I don't know if it's an expense thing or not, but they've sort of left this car a little bit short. So I think for that reason, it's not moving the needle in any particular fashion. It's just keeping pace with the dual cab fraternity, and even then, you know, this I think would fit really quite favorably in this segment from 2 or 3 years ago, but as of now it's kind of missing the mark in some places dynamically. Noise, vibration, all the rest, again, slight incremental improvements over the predecessor Triton, but definitely not setting any new benchmarks.
The lack of change is also highlighted by the Triton's 6-speed gearbox, which lacks the intuitiveness of some rivals, particularly when it comes to kicking down gears upon braking. And that trait has been highlighted by the deletion of the predecessor's steering wheel mounted paddle shifters. The other major talking point here is the intervention of the Triton's standard safety systems, particularly its driver attention warning, which is plain intrusive and distracting. So much so, we reckon it looms as a bit of a deal breaker for some prospective buyers.
Okay, so this is probably the final test on this launch of the new Triton. Its off-road ability. We are tackling sort of a variety of terrain here just outside of Adelaide. I've got to say, it's doing it all really without breaking a sweat. Nothing overly difficult, but lots of dry creek crossings, lots of wheel articulation, and moments for the traction control to do its thing. And I have to say, it's done it all with absolute ease. I wouldn't say it's the smoothest ute out there in terms of control, especially side to side movement. It's, you know, you'll know you're on rocky ground underneath because you'll be getting whipped around quite a bit inside the cabin. But all in all, I have to say it's worked pretty well. This new electrically assisted steering is much easier to navigate four-wheel drive tracks on. It's obviously lighter. You're not getting that same overbearing feedback all of the time. Instead, yes, you do get a little bit of feedback, but it's all good, and it does streamline the driving experience. So hill descent control, hill start assist, they all combine to make this a much easier off-road proposition than before. I will say the traction control system has been prohibitive 1 or 2 times, so I'm going to have a quick go at another little rocky climb here. It's got a big hollow in the middle of it. And look at that, the traction control light is spinning as I bury my foot, and it's not letting me go forward. So it's actually stopping that forward progress and kind of hindering me more than it is helping me. But that's just been on the odd occasion, and I just think the throttle response too is probably not quite as quick-witted as the Triton's core competitors, but in these moderate four-wheel drive settings, it has done everything really easily and is quite convincing. It's definitely not going to let you down on a weekend away, and we're not really touching on this car's core four-wheel drive strength. That is the Super Select 2 system. It's available in the top two variants and allows you to drive in four-wheel drive mode on sealed surfaces, which is still a unique feature in this segment. So it's no denying that this is a smarter, more sensible execution of the dual cab ute from Mitsubishi. The Triton is tangibly better on road and it has a lot more technology away from it. And they certainly go a long way in justifying the increase in purchase price. But back to the original question, does it genuinely move the needle for dual cab performance and functionality? If we take a step back, I think the answer has to be no, but it still remains a really compelling option in the dual cab market, especially with a smorgasbord of new entrants around.